Hi, and welcome to the show. Rate and review at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/podcast. Today in the show, we have Lei Chu. She's a urologist. Her Kevin MD article is titled Infertility, Navigating the Challenges of IVF and the Importance of Self-Advocacy. Lei, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We'll get into the article in a little bit, but first off, briefly share your story and journey to where you are today.
Well, like a lot of physicians, got married late in life, had children late in life, of course. That led to a lot of challenges. So we struggle with infertility. Surprisingly, I treat male infertility day in, day out. It's not something I expected to find. But unfortunately, we had issues. Both me and my husband had a problem. So we went to see a reproductive endocrinologist. And it just went through a lot of hurdles to get testing done. A lot of things we just not know what to expect. A lot of things were not, it just seemed like a mystery. I just followed directions. When I showed up, I really didn't know what to expect. Doctor tells me this is what we're going to do. And nurse explained to me the protocol is like this. So you just follow and then you just show up. So every other day I went in after started stimulation medication. Every other day I went in to get ultrasound done, blood work done. It just seems like it's just so automatic. And then the first time we did retrieval, I did great. We got 3 normal chromosome embryos. I was elated because we really only just wanted 2 to 3 kids. The fact we had 3 embryos, we thought we're done. One retrieval, we're done. But unfortunately, none of the embryos implanted. We had to end up doing another retrieval. And luckily, we were able to get another child out of this, which is my 5-year-old daughter now. And then by then, I started another retrieval, several other transfers. They all failed. This is a journey. It's just very difficult. After the pandemic started, I restarted more retrievals and transfer. I was able to finally have my second child with my 5-month-old son.
All right. So you said that it was a little bit of a rush process. There's, you were just shuttled from one place to another. You were told to come back and do tests and follow up. Now, if you had to do this again, like what would you like to see? What would you have liked to see done differently?
When patient comes to see me, I'm going to do surgery on them. I'm going to tell them, hey, we're going to position you like this. The surgery can take this long. Complications include those. Side effects of possible medicines we gave you include those. I just felt like in the fertility world, those are just skipped over because I think part of it because women are going through infertility are so healthy and we're so determined. We have so much perseverance. We want this so desperately that we're willing to do anything to achieve that goal. And I felt like a lot of this medical practice standards are skipped over.
Now, you're a urologist, so you obviously deal with male infertility. Now, your experience with the IVF world, has that changed anything that you've done as a physician treating infertility in males?
For sure. I think that after going through this, I have a lot more compassion for my patients going through fertility. I share my story with them and I know the pain they go through and the desperation. I not only try to treat my male patients with infertility with surgeries or medications, but also try to be advocate for their partners.
Now, when you said that you share your story, you share the pain and desperation. So talk about some of those emotions as you were going through your own IVF journey. What was it like for you just as you were going through all of this?
I think we went through infertility took us about 5 years to have 2 children. Living, breathing IVF is difficult. You plan your vacation around your cycles. For me, I plan my big cases around my cycles, and I have to take solo practice.
So what was that look like when you say you had to plan your big cases around your cycle? So give us a story or an example of that.
For example, I do urology is very diverse. I do a little bit of everything. So I do oncology, stones, prostate. So big case for me, like for example, partial nephrectomy or radical prostate. So I don't want to be on medicine when I do surgeries, right? So I tend to make sure I'm off during this time. I'm not on any medication doing through stimulations before I do those surgeries. And also after transfers, it's best, in my experience, best to be stress-free. So I tend to make sure that my cases are done after I'm done with transfer or before I transfer, but not during the transfer process.
So what does it feel like when you're on the medicine such that you can't do surgeries or procedures while you're on the medicine? How do you feel on them?
Well, it doesn't really affect me intellectually, but I think it makes me a little bit more jittery.
Mm.
So I'm really sensitive to caffeine. So if I drink a little coffee, I'm more jittery. But if I take medicine, I can feel like my heart rate is a little bit faster. I feel like I talk a little bit faster, and I already talk really fast.
Yeah.
So it just felt a little bit more jittery, and I don't want to do any big cases when I'm taking the medicine. I don't want to, since we put so much money and time into the retrieval and transfer, I don't want to have anything endanger that. So I don't want any stress involved.
So I want to talk about how your IVF journey intersects with you as a solo private practice urologist, because I can only imagine how stressful your professional career is. So tell me, how did your IVF journey, how did that affect you professionally, and how did you manage everything that you had to do being solo private practice urologist?
I haven't thought about that. I figured every woman go through this. I just thought that this is just normal. I didn't really think that it was anything I did was super extra. I mean, I know many physicians who have gone through IVF. Several of my OB colleagues have gone through it either at the same time or after me. So I've seen other women who my church who gone through IVF too. So it just seems to me it's a very common process. So it definitely for solo practice, the challenge for me is to schedule,
Yeah.
right? So I always try to be the first patient of the day to get there, get my ultrasound done, get my blood work done. I push down my clinic so that I'm not late for my clinic. So a lot of coordination has been involved, and the retrieval requires anesthesia, so I can't work the whole day. So I just have to take a whole day off, and that's difficult too, right? For patients, because in Houston we have 8 million people and about 120 urologists. So I think it certainly has been very challenging, just schedule wise, and then emotionally it was challenging. Time wise, it was challenging, but I just figure every woman go through that.
Now, you mentioned a few places that you went to for support, and it must have been incredibly challenging, not only physically, mentally, and emotionally. Now, where did you go for support so you didn't feel like you have to go through this alone?
So there are some groups on Reddit for IVF. There's some groups on Facebook, social media. There's some women who gone through infertility at church, and then just colleagues who have gone through it. So the thing is that nobody voluntarily talks about this until you talk about your challenges. Then people open up and tell you, "Oh, I went through that too, and I had certain same challenges too." So I think a lot of when I went to my reproductive technology clinic, for patients there, but nobody talks to each other,
Hmm.
right? So like we don't talk to each other, get numbers and try to meet up and support each other. It seems like such a lonely process, and it's such a difficult process. The quest for a child is such a personal goal. Like it's not something that other people can understand.
Now, you summarize your journey in a book, IVF Diaries, A Female Urologist Infertility Journey. Now, for those other physicians who may be going through the IVF journey, tell us about some of the pieces of advice that you could share with them, some wisdom, just based on your own experiences.
So there's a lot of social media, a lot of women who gone through this. There are women who gone through 12 retrievals, 15 retrievals before. They have a lot of wisdom to share with you in terms of possible side effects, alternatives to treatment. The thing about IVF is there's always alternatives. Doesn't mean you have to go through this protocol. There's other protocols. There's just not one transfer protocol. There's various stimulation transfer protocols. There are always alternatives. I was lucky to have really good reproductive neurologists, and we were able to have 2 children, but I felt that a lot of times it's difficult to be presented with different options when you're that desperate, struggling. I felt that sometimes you just any chance of light, any chance of possibility is just blindly accepted. So I did a lot of research on social media with those women, but I also did there's a lot of research articles actually.
Hmm.
So when I first started this process 5 years ago, for example, PGS testing, pre-genetic screening, is highly promoted. Um, and nowadays, 5 years later, is not. It's more considered controversial. It is not necessary. The reason why is because several articles with randomized studies have shown pre-genetic testing does not increase the likelihood of childbirth cumulatively. That means per woman, childbirth is not increased, not per cycle, but per woman.
Now, you're in solo private practice, so you have some semblance of control over your schedule, of course, so you're able to control your schedule around your treatments. Some physicians may not be in private practice. They may work for hospitals or big medical groups, and they may not have as much control. And What kind of advice? How can they advocate? Because it's very difficult, of course, to go through these treatments and having to see patients and doing procedures and being told they have to see X amount of patients and do X amount of surgeries. How can they speak up and perhaps advocate for themselves when they have to work in a large group, especially if they're undergoing IVF?
Being outspoken is important. Being a
Mm,
self-advocate is really important. You have people who have not gone through infertility struggles do not understand it.
yeah.
If this is really important to you and you have not as much control over your practice, you have to make your goal well known. You have to speak with your boss with empathy. Let them know how important this is for you, and then I mean, retrieval and transfer, there is limited time. So you can plan ahead of time and tell them during this time, I have to be less stressed out. I have to be less busy. Speaking out is very important. Unfortunately for IVF, time is of the essence. So delaying is not helpful.
Now, you said that people who haven't gone through the IVF journey, there's a lot of things that they don't understand. So you have a platform here. You have a lot of medical administrators who listen to this podcast, a lot of physician leaders. Now, what do you want them to know about the IVF journey?
If I can go through this again, I would like my doctors to give me alternatives.
Mm,
For example, my second cycle of stimulation, I asked my doctor, I say, the first cycle, I had a low stimulation protocol. I only get 7 embryos and 3 of them normal, very low dose. So I went to second cycle, I said, can I have triple the dose of stimulation so I can get more eggs and more embryos so I can make it more worthwhile? My doctor says, okay, we can try it. We went through that cycle. I got the same number. I mean, actually, I did worse. I got same number of embryos, but only one was normal instead of 3 that was normal the first time. And there was only 2 months in between. So it wasn't like a lot of time went by. So if I can go through this again, I would like my reproductive endocrinologist to give me options and tell me there are alternatives to different stimulation protocols, to look at me as a person, look at my AMH, anti-Mullerian hormone, my follicle count, that's the number of follicles that have the start of the cycle, to have a more individualized, and my race too. So results of IVF does vary based on ethnicity. So Asian people tend to perform differently compared to Caucasian women versus African American women. I don't want to be like a cookie cutter.
hmm
I want to have a more individualized protocol. The frustrating thing is I had to consult probably about 7 to 8 different clinics across the country to understand there are alternatives. There are every doctor that I consult, there are 7 to 8 top clinics, IVF clinics in the country, CNY, Life IVF. So all those clinics have really high success rate, but I felt that every doctor I went to a consult with gave me a different protocol for
hmm
stimulation, a different transfer protocol. I felt that if what is the best, I wish they would have told me for you, based on my experience, that I can tell you that this is what I recommend. If this doesn't work, I think this will be the second best. But I don't want to be just, oh, because you're this age and because you have this many follicles, we're going to do this. That's basically the message I want, because this is not only expensive, it's emotional draining. The failures are personal. Women take a lot of professional women, especially doctors, we take a lot of failures very personally, not only in our career, but also in our personal life. So when the IVF transfer fails, I at least felt that it was my fault, that my body didn't work. But then that is not necessarily true. Maybe I wasn't on the right protocol. Maybe my transfer wasn't done correctly. Maybe the environment wasn't optimal. Maybe the embryo wasn't thought of correctly. So there was a lot of mysteries around the IVF. And we need to open the curtains, right, to review the mystery of IVF, the lab that's involved. I mean, some IVF clinics I can talk to the embryologist and talk about details of my embryos. Some IVF clinics I cannot.
hmm
The embryologists are completely shielded. I don't know. So I felt that since I'm spending so much effort and money and time, that I should be given access to those things. For example, when a patient comes to me and say, hey, I said there are 2 ways to do the surgery. You can do this or this. And then they ask me, what do you want to do? I tell them, I think based on your case,
hmm
this will be preferred. Success rate is this. I mean, IVF has been around since 1980s. There's a lot of data, right? So it's not like, this is new field, not a lot of data. With the IVF, I felt like, my patients come to me for advice. I tell them, hey, based on literature, based on research, this is what I recommend. But with IVF, I felt like I had to do a lot of my own research. I have to go to my doctor and say, this is what I want to do. That's not right. I mean, right, I feel like a physician should be my guide.
We're talking to Lei Chu. She's a urologist. Her Kevin MD article is titled Infertility, Navigating the Challenges of IVF and the Importance of Self-Advocacy. Lei, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
So I lived, breathed in IVF for 5 years. It's an emotional process, very difficult, but we were lucky enough to have 2 children. I think many women have chance for success, and I think just always know there are alternatives. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Advocate for yourself, do your own research, and be nice to your reproductive endocrinologist because they do this day in and day out. It's a lot of hard work for them as well. And I think when I'm pregnant, my doctor is related, right? So that's basically my take-home message.
Lei, thank you so much for sharing your story, time, and insight, and thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you.